Right, here we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Shift Book Club. I am, as you know, journalist and creator of The Shift, Sam Baker, and I'm really happy to be here with Araminta Hall, who is the author of our first book club pick of 2024, One of the Good Guys. And we got to the end of January. Hooray! Who knew we were ever going to get here? Araminta is a journalist, a teacher who has written 5 previous novels, including the bestseller Everything and Nothing. But her latest, as you all know, because you've read it, is Next Level. One of the Good Guys comes garlanded with praise like this. An absolutely thrilling tale full of breathless cliffside terror and fresh feminist theory, masked in tight, propulsive mystery. That's Lisa Taddeo, author of the genre-breaking global smash hit 3 Women. And actually, Araminta, it was Lisa who told me I had to read it.
Oh, was it?
So Laura, the PR, had been like hassling me correctly. And I saw there was a quote from Lisa, so I asked her, and she was like, yes, you've got to read it. It's amazing.
Amazing.
A razor-laced and dangerously glittering novel, and that's Gillian Flynn, who also happens to be Araminta's American publisher, who we'll talk about that a bit in a minute. And the very hard to please Sunday Times described it as groundbreaking. So, you know, get you.
I'll take that.
I'm not going to say anything else about One of the Good Guys because I think it'd be better if you hear that from Araminta. But before we get going, I should say for everyone here now and everyone watching on Catch Up on YouTube, there will possibly be spoilers. So don't leave me horrible messages because I've warned you. Thank you for being here, Araminta. It's lovely to see you.
Thanks for having me.
We were just saying, I don't know whether we last kind of crossed when I was editing Just 17 and you were on Bliss, or maybe you were on New Woman and I was on Company or something, but it's horrifyingly long time ago.
It is a very long time ago, which I think we've just worked out by working out how old my oldest child is. And it was a very long time ago. And it was a strange time, wasn't it? Working on women's magazines in the mid-90s. It was odd. It was it felt slightly liberating and like the thing you should be doing. But looking back on it now, it was still a world of prepubescent models and sort of articles about how to keep your man. So it was a strange time. I don't think we realized, well, I didn't really realize how strange it was and at the time, definitely.
No, it's only now when you look back. I mean, this isn't what we're here to talk about, but I remember when I was editing, I won't say which magazine because it will give away who said this to me, but it was right in the depths of the Lads Mag era, and it was all, you know, it wasn't just Loaded and like FHM and Nuts and Zoo. And I remember my boss saying to me, oh, well, Reader's Girlfriends is doing really well on Nuts. And that's not the bloke sending it in, it's the girl. So I think that you should be addressing that. And I was just like, oh, I really need to leave this job. This is not my spiritual home.
And you know what? I think also, I mean, I think that idea, I think, is really sort of what slightly underpins One of the Good Guys. I mean, like a lot of my books, is that I think we were all conned into thinking that we had to be, well, actually, I think Gillian Flynn put it best in her Cool Girl speech in Gone Girl, you know. We were all conned into thinking that we needed to be these cool girls who didn't actually, you know, who could keep up with the men, and we weren't going to care about anything. And it was so stupid. It was just like us going like, we'll just be men, rather than actually thinking about what we wanted as women and what feminism meant. So I'm really glad that those moments are over. Yeah.
Touch wood.
Touch wood, yeah.
So why don't you describe One of the Good Guys to us, because I'm damned if I can.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it is a difficult book to describe without giving away too many plots. I mean, basically it's the story of a man called Cole who moves to a remote stretch of the south coast of England because his marriage has come to an end and he's nursing this broken heart, and he wants to get away from like consumerism and sort of, you know, in London and all those sorts of things. And he really can't understand why his marriage has ended, because he is a good guy. You know, he is not you're not gonna find him getting drunk with the lads down the pub, or, you know, shagging around, or doing anything. Actually, he's, you know, he's domestic, he wants to have a baby, he supports his wife's career, so he just can't get it. But, you know, one of the reasons he can't get it is because he hasn't actually thought about it harder, much further than the fact that he can't get it. But anyway, he gets to the South Coast, and he meets this woman called Lenny, who's living, she's an artist, and she's living in this dilapidated cottage right on the edge of this sort of eroding cliff. And they strike up this sort of friendship that maybe is going to tip over into romance. And meanwhile, there are these two young women doing a coast-to-coast charity walk protesting against male violence. And they're getting closer and closer. And when they reach Cole and Lenny's bit of land, they vanish without a trace. And the longer they stay missing, you know, they're that certain type of woman that the media always goes mad for. When when that type of woman goes missing, the media sort of treats it like a party almost, you know. So the media descends, and with every day that they stay missing, the frenzy builds and builds and builds. I don't think I can say much more than that without giving too much away.
It's a genius title. Where did it come from?
I mean, it was actually, it's the only title that I have ever come up with completely on my own. And I sent it to my agent, and she was like, yeah, it's really good. And then for every editor it's gone to, no one has ever said to me, oh, we need to do something about the title. And normally the title is that, well, firstly, I can never think of titles. And secondly, there's always so much back and forth between different editors, or, you know, agents or whatever. So, and it was literally, I was just writing one day, and I used the phrase "one of the good guys," and I was like, oh my God, okay, that's it, I'm going to use it. So it was just one of those moments which was so pleasing, and I hope I will have again.
Yeah.
It's the first time I've had it in 6 books. So.
Yeah, it's brilliant because it takes you right. It tells you immediately what it is, but it's not at all derivative. It's not like, you know, it's not one of those titles where you can tell that a pool of editors and marketing people have sat together with all the books they want to compete with sitting up in front of them, trying to work out a title that's the kind of, you know.
That is very true. It's that, yeah, no, that is pleasing about it.
You know, that kind of Gone Girl on the Train thing. What came first for you? Was it plot, character, climate, title?
It's always the same with me, is that I'm always thinking about what I want to write about. And for me, that's like, I think the easiest way to describe that is a theme. And I think I have a theme that runs through all my books, which for me is sort of, I'm really concerned with gender politics and how women aren't listened to. There's, you know, lots of things like that. So I think that that's sort of something I just think about a lot, and I read about a lot, and I'm always sort of concerned with that. And then I think normally about the characters who I would like to inhabit my book. With this book, the setting was really important. So, and it's a real setting, and it's a setting that I know really well because I live in Brighton, and it's a walk I do about 40 minutes away from my house. And so it was one of those things that I'd always wanted to write something set there. And the more I was sort of thinking about what I wanted to write, the more it felt right. But I mean, for me, plot is the last thing that comes. It's not that I don't know where I'm going, and I don't, like, I know what I want to happen in the book, and I know vaguely what I want to happen, but I sort of feel like you can make a plot work. Like, a plot is the most it's the most pliable part of a book, you know. Like, I think Stephen King said something like, if you've got good enough believable enough characters, you can land a spaceship in your garden. But if your readers aren't into your characters, they don't believe in them, you know, you can't even take them to buy a pint of milk. And I so agree with that. I sort of think like you should never change your characters to fit your plot. It should always be the other way around. And there is always another way you can get someone somewhere, or you can discover something or something. So yeah, plot is my last piece of it, basically.
It's quite interesting that though with basically a I mean, it's not just a psychological thriller, obviously, and I say just, I don't mean just in a derogatory way. Not only a psychological thriller, but it's quite unusual, I think, for a psychological thriller, for there not to be, you know, for plotting not to be have come that far up at the beginning, because, you know, you've got to maintain that suspense and you've got that epic twist. Did you know the twist from the beginning?
The twist I did, because I sort of think, I mean, I've obviously always got twists in my book, but I think with this book, the twist is sort of the point of the book. So that came really early when I was formulating the idea, it came really early to me of what I wanted to do. And so I always knew that was what I was going to do, but I didn't know how I was going to do it. And I didn't know exactly how it was going to work as a twist. And in fact, you know, it had so many iterations before it became exactly what it was. But yes, it was always going to happen. That's why I always have like a point. It's like an end point in my book where I'm like, okay, I know I'm heading there, but everything else sort of needs to be in place before I work out exactly how I get there. I'm not sure but it's definitely not the quickest way to write a book, because you're not, you know, I think it would be much better if I could plot properly. It would be much, much better, because then you probably wouldn't do as many drafts as I do, because I invariably get things wrong, or, you know, I muddle things up. So.
How many drafts do you do?
I mean, quite a lot. I mean, I do. My first draft is just for me. And I think that's because I think in a way, my first draft is me plotting, actually, in that I know my characters, I know most of the things, but I don't really know. So I sort of have to tell myself the story and get to know the characters. And the only way I have found myself able to do that is to write a first draft. But I also can do that quite quickly, because I have no intention of ever showing it to anyone. So it's not about nice writing or anything like that. And I really genuinely never even show that to my agent. And then I start again for my second draft, and it's from then onwards. And I probably will write a basic plan at the end of my first draft, and then my second draft is the draft that I work with. But I mean, my third draft could easily be cutting out half of it and rewriting half of it, or whatever. And then from then on, it's more just like, it will be more, I mean, it's more than editing probably, but it's more like editing. It's not like, you know, trashing loads of it and starting again. So.
So what was the climate that you were writing it in?
Well, for me, it's a real like post Me Too, because I you know, all my books, like I said, are concerned with gender relations and a woman's place in the world. And, you know, I've done that in lots of different ways. And I think that after Me Too, I sort of expected there to be a big change, you know, which I think most of us did. And I found myself over the last few years, like having more and more conversations with friends about feeling let down and feeling angry, but none of us were able to sort of put our finger on why we were feeling, because we were like, oh, laws have changed. And, you know, when I was a young woman at work or on the tube in London or whatever, you know, it was totally acceptable for, you know, men to comment at you or touch you, or, you know, that thing of builders, you know, constantly wolf whistling or all that sort of stuff. And, you know, you'd be in a nightclub and people would physically, you know, hold you or whatever. And so I think all that had changed. And I was like, I just don't know why I'm feeling so angry. And then it was actually the location of this book. I did this walk, which the book is, you know, set on this it's like it's a coastal path, and there are Coast Guard cottages along it, and it's this really wild landscape. And I was doing that walk one day, and I walked past the cottages, as I often had done, and I saw the woman who lives in one of them there. And as I always thought when I walked past, I'd be like, God, such an isolated way to live, and does she get scared? And I would be scared, and oh my goodness, what happens at night? You know, I had all these thoughts. Anyway, that night I went out in Brighton, and I live in very central Brighton, and as most people know, it's a very vibrant, bustling city. And I walked home at 10 o'clock at night or something, and it was dark, but you know, it was not deserted. It was not 2 o'clock in the morning. And I felt scared. And I realized that, I mean, I wasn't terrified or anything, but I just, you know, I had that fear in my head. And I just realized that I always feel like that, you know, when I'm out alone at night, or when I'm on my own on a coastal path, or in a wood walking my dog or something. And I just thought, actually, it doesn't matter if you're on your own at the edge of a cliff or you're walking through streets, you know, you're not actually particularly safe anywhere as a woman. If, you know, I mean, we are safe, you know, most of us, you know, nothing terrible will happen to, although we all have bad things that have happened to us. And I just thought, my God, that is sort of what equality is, isn't it? If you feel safe walking out your front door. And then I was like, and that's not just about women. That is like race, sexuality, religion. It's like, there's such a small percentage of people who just walk out their front door and feel safe, or don't second guess themselves, or don't plan their route home, and all that sort of stuff. And I just, yeah, so that was sort of, for me, it was like a light bulb moment. I was like, this is why me and my friends are still angry, and why we're still don't feel comfortable in our world. And so I wanted to write about that. That was sort of my sort of fundamental base point when I started writing the book.
I mean, it's not that long ago that editors were telling us all that we couldn't write issue books, that issue books didn't sell. So how did you manage? I mean, we know they've kind of started to shift, just the same as they've shifted to, you can write a, you know, unlikable character so long as you've got someone to root for, all of those kind of things. But how did you balance the issues with the story?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to be careful, because I think otherwise you're sort of writing a polemic and it's really dull to read. And yeah, I just hope that I've refrained from actually putting it on the page. Although if you're Jonathan Franzen, you can absolutely put it on the page. So,
yeah, well, that's because you're a white guy.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, if I wrote a speech like "You Having Freedom" about climate change, about women's rights or something, I mean, I'm sure my editor would have crossed that out. But I mean, I have lovely editors actually on both sides of the Atlantic, and they were really behind. I mean, that is one thing. Publishing is populated by women, actually. A majority of people in it are, and so they're really into talking about those things, which is, it's great, actually. And my editor in America, actually, she was young. I mean, she was really young, or she is, and yeah, she was so fired up by all those ideas, and those are the ideas that those are the conversations she's having with her friends. So yeah, I think I never came really up against that of like, you can't write an issue book. So yeah, I was just sort of lucky, I guess.
No, I think it's definitely changed, but quite often, I mean, like for self-preservation, it's best not to look at Amazon or Goodreads, but quite often, and not this book, but quite often you'll look and you'll go, someone will say, oh, I just felt like I was being lectured or whatever. And it's like, you know, you absolutely managed to steer clear of that.
Well, I hope so, because yeah, it does always worry me that. I tell you what's been amazing about this book, though, is that I've often, like I said, all my books are sort of have issues, but you know, before it's been quite divisive. You know, people have been like, oh, I really agree with that, or I really disagree with that, or you know. But with this book, I don't know if it's just it was happened to be published at the right. I don't know what it was, but everybody and I've had more messages about this book than any other book I've ever written. and everybody's feeling the same thing. And it's like and it's exactly what I was thinking when I wrote it, which is, you know, normally, obviously, I'm happy for people to interpret my books however they want to, because that's what books are. But it's quite incredible when someone interprets your book in the way that you wrote it is amazing. And so, and I found that a lot, and I feel like everybody's feeling the same thing. So I feel like maybe we are all angry at the moment, and we are all in the same place. And I also just think young women are just, they know the language, they understand things in a way that when I was in my 20s and 30s, I didn't. I much more wanted to please, and I was much more scared of having anything I had taken away from me. And I didn't realize that a lot of my fear came from just society as a whole and the way that men were. But I think I see in young women now this sort of really strong knowledge and sense of themselves and power. And so it's been so cheering to watch the response to it for me personally.
There was a question that I was going to say for later, which is from Elaine W, who can't be here tonight, but is usually here. And she wanted to know what sort of feedback you'd had from men.
Well, funnily, I haven't had too bad. I had one man, it's actually still on Amazon, like my favorite review of this book on Amazon. I think he gave it 2 stars, or maybe it was 1, but he actually wrote the line of something about, this writer clearly thinks that that all women walk around in a state of terror all the time, which is, I sort of think, almost the opposite of what my book is about. And then he was like, that's not my experience of being a woman. And then comma, I know I'm a man, but still.
Oh, God.
I wish I could like put that on the cover of the book, because it sort of just encapsulates everything. But no, but yeah, but I mean, I've had lovely reviews from men and people. Actually, I've had a few gay men saying this feels very similar to my experience, and I really hope straight men are reading this and things. So, I mean, I think inevitably my readers will mainly be women, because that's the main demographic who reads every single novel. And I think a lot of men don't read books by women as well, so, which is sad, but the ones who
astonishing.
have, I know.
I was going to say, it's astonishing that hasn't changed in all this time.
I mean, I'm not sure it has massively. I mean,
no.
I have a 25-year-old son, and I can assure you he's a voracious reader, and he certainly reads books by women. But I think those are the majority of books I've given him. But so again, maybe things are changing, maybe things will change with this next generation, but who knows?
Who knows? Let's talk about Cole.
Yeah.
I mean, it was interesting. I had and I'd love to know what everybody else thinks. So do put your thoughts, comments, questions in the chat box. When I started reading it, it took me like maybe onto the second page to realize that Laurie says bleh. It took me onto the second page to realize that Cole wasn't a woman.
Yeah, I did that deliberately.
My immediate assumption was that it would be a woman who was feeling like that, which is just, that says so much more about me than it says about anything else. But from that second page, I basically felt gaslit the entire book, which made for a really, really uncomfortable but weirdly compulsive reading experience. What kind of research, if any, did you do for Cole?
I didn't really do much. I mean, I did a lot of sort of, because I'm not a massive social media user, and I knew that I wanted to use social media in the book. So I did a lot of rabbit hole days on social media, especially on sites I'd never been on before, like Reddit, which, my God. And Cole isn't, the interesting thing about Cole for me as writing him was he's not he's not your classic thriller. I didn't want to write a bad guy, you know, a classic. I didn't want Cole to want to hurt anyone or to be his, I wanted his aim to be good, you know. And for me, Cole sort of is a real symbol of where we are now, where I just think the bar to be a good man is so low, and you know the bar to be a good woman is so high. And I think that I just think that he just has not interrogated why he always gets what he wants, and because he always gets what he wants because he's a certain type of man, he hasn't really worked out that there are different ways of being, and that he's not entitled to always get the things he wants. And I think, I mean, it's so dangerous to come up against someone like him who doesn't take no for an answer, really, but he does it in the most charming way and with what he thinks is a good heart. And so, yeah, so I was really interested in that idea. And he was a fun character to write for that reason, because I often felt like I sort of knew him better than he knew himself, whereas normally you sort of hope to know your character. But it was like, you know, and I would sometimes put words in his mouth and then be like, oh, there's no way he would say that, or he's too self-aware to say actually what he's feeling half the time. So yeah, so I didn't really research him, but it just was like an amalgamation of a lot of men I've seen in the media over the years, really.
Well, it's that kind of hashtag not all men thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then that sense that, you know, men get a medal for just
Yeah.
babysitting their own children. Or, I mean, I was doing an interview for the podcast last week, and somebody said to me, you know, somebody really successful and switched on and all that, and she said, oh, he does everything I ask.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, and for that we all give him a round of applause, but he always, you know,
And he has to
it's
be
just,
asked.
he
That's
has
the
to be
other thing
asked.
that's so
Yeah.
annoying. I know I saw on Twitter a couple of years ago a really successful female novelist, whose name I shall not mention, who was going on a trip, and she was talking about how she had frozen all the meals for her husband and daughter for the trip. And she meant it nicely. She was like, oh, and I booked the cleaner to come loads more times, and I've done this and I've done that. And I just was like, it's incredible. Like, that when you're not embarrassed to say that out loud, you know, or even when you're
Mm,
writing it, you're not thinking, why am I doing all this just to go on a trip? Like, why am I not walking out the door? But yeah, so I think, yeah, it's a perennial shock to me that women live with men like that, but they do. It's like,
yeah.
I
It's,
mean,
well, it's just, I think so many women of our generation have got mums who think we're lucky if our husbands let us, you know, speaking for a friend.
yeah.
And, you know, and so certainly women in their 40s and 50s, as you know, but the blokes they're with grew up being treated like that.
Totally. And I think we're grateful, which is something that I say in one of, you know, it's something I address in one of the good guys. I think we're really grateful when men are nice to us and do these basic things. And we've had to learn not to, or I think I've had to learn not to be grateful. You know, I look back at boyfriends I had when I was younger, and yeah, it was like they came home at night and you were pleased, you know, sort of thing. It was such a low bar.
Yeah.
This is the thing. Everything is such, and I think in generally in society, it's still a really low bar. So you know, I mean, I think most of us have resolved, you know, unless we're in terrible domestic situations, you know, I hope most people have resolved their domestic issues and, you know, work through things. But I think in general, the idea and the things that we see in the media makes us think still that men are incredible for, yeah, doing the washing up, which, you know.
Yeah, I mean, like Tanya says, it says a lot about how boys are parented and the type of man they grow up to be. But also, I do think that that is our generation. And certainly, you know, I don't think he'll watch this. My brother, God love him, I think you know, he just wasn't asked to do the washing up,
That's the
you
thing.
know. And I just think that kind of, I hope that has changed, but I do wonder
I
to what
think, I
extent it
mean,
has.
I think it certainly has in terms of like what I see, but you know, I live in Brighton, which one of one of the most
Yeah, well,
liberal
that's the
bubble
trouble, isn't
places
it?
you could live in. But I also think we shouldn't blame the mothers who brought their sons up like that, because it's a Victorian
Mm.
value system that we is a hangover from a time when women weren't even allowed, you know, to vote. We weren't allowed out of the kitchen. We weren't allowed. So you know, we were the property of our husbands. So I think that it's really hard to break free from a societal thought. You know, it takes big action and big movements, and you know, and it takes so much time. And that's why I sort of hope that post Me Too we are in another of those times. I do feel like we are slightly. I feel like young women are pushing back now and being like, I mean, like, I think even if you just watch like, you know, something like Love Island, like I remember when that first came on, it was shocking, you know, it was just like men behaving badly and getting away with it. And like for the last couple of years, it's actually, you know, the women are not prepared to put up with the behavior, and they're calling people out, and they're using terms, you know, they're calling out misogyny in language that we all now understand. And I think that has to mean something. And, you know, there has to be a feeling that's going to push forward. And I do think most people are bringing their sons up differently now, you know, or just they're bringing them up the same, you know, sons and daughters.
Fingers crossed. I mean, I think we could talk about that all night, but I want to come back to Cole and Mel and that the low
Mhm.
bar that we set.
Yeah.
But Andrea asked a really good question, and then Kristen added on, which about social media. And you use social media and media such a lot in the book. Why did you decide to do that?
Because I think that is the last sort of, well, apart from in the privacy of your own home, I think it is the last sort of unregulated space. And I think what I think is interesting is we, you know, Me Too changed what we were able to say. You know, pretty much everybody has understood that you can't be openly misogynistic and keep your job. You know, women have to be paid the same. You know, you have to know how many women you hire, and all those sorts of things. You know, even builders, you know, have realized they can't shout at women in the street, you know, all those things. But I think we're deluded if we think those thoughts and feelings of misogyny have gone away. And I think that social media is where it's expressed. And
Mm.
I mean, actually, when I started writing the book, I was going to use it a little bit. And like I say, I don't use it much myself. So it was so I sort of started looking at everything and reading stuff. And I was actually shocked at how deep the misogyny goes in that, and how rampant it is, and how unchecked it is, and how unnuanced. Or, I mean, obviously, I knew discussions on social media were unnuanced, but I was really shocked when I started going into threads and things as to how people just take a side, and they stick to it, and there's no, you know, you're right or you're wrong. And so it felt like something that I really wanted to explore more in the book. And it was actually my American editor who said to me, yeah, I just think you should be braver. Like, you shouldn't just have the odd bit. Like in that third section, you know, it was in the third section that I had the odd bit. And she was like, why don't you tell the story through social media? And then you can tell us what Lenny's thinking in another way. And it was like a real light bulb moment. I was like, I can actually do that. And I can show what people are thinking. Because you know, I mean, we've all lived through enough missing women cases to know what happens and what it looks like on social media, and what, you know, and in fact, I had just finished one of my last drafts when Nicola Bulley went missing. And
That was,
I mean, it was so, but that was just because I was on a lot of social media at that time, and it was just I mean, in fact, I think it made me do a bit more than I would have done, because I was like, wow, it's like the Wild West. It's just shocking, you know, it's so. And I think, unfortunately, I think we are going to have to regulate that space. I mean, I say unfortunately because I would love to live in a world where we didn't have to regulate things, but it's so disgusting, and it's so, I mean, I think that's the scary thing, is humans left up to their own devices can be pretty awful and say terrible things. And I guess we're going to have to, you know, the things that are said on social media could not be said in public out loud. They, you know, you would lose your job if, or whatever, you know, or your family, or whatever.
I was thinking earlier when you were talking about Cole, and you were saying that he doesn't mean anyone ill. And I mean, he's your character, so it's a bit presumptuous for me to disagree with you about your character. But, and this may be because I have been in a coercive relationship myself a long time ago. But and that may also be why I felt so uncomfortable at sometimes reading it, because it rang so true. But it struck me not that he wanted necessarily to hurt Mel or Lenny ultimately, that he wanted, but everything was so much about him.
Yeah.
And what he wanted and what was right, that he just prioritized himself so much and was so entitled, that I actually felt that he was dangerous.
No, he is completely dangerous. I think what I meant by that more was that he's not setting out with bad intentions, as in a sort of a basic level of bad intentions. He's not thinking, I want to break you, I want to physically hurt you, but that's why I think he's almost more dangerous, because he thinks he's so convinced that what he wants is the right thing, and that the things he thinks are right, that he can't really let in other thoughts or desires. So he is, yeah, just he's complete. I mean, if you said to him, you're completely fixated on your own desires and you have no, you are, you know, you are controlling, he would be shocked, you know, because he truly believes himself to be a good person. But I mean,
He
those
wouldn't
things,
accept it, would he?
no,
He wouldn't accept
absolutely
that he
not.
was.
I mean, he calls himself a feminist quite a few times
Oh,
in the book. I know,
yeah.
but on sort of on paper, he is supportive of Mel's career. He does want to be the person who stays at home with the baby. He does all the cooking. He does, that's what I mean. It's just this incredibly low bar of like, that's what we would never call a woman a feminist, or we would never call a woman even good for just doing those things, you know. And there's, you know, there's a moment where Mel is lying in a hospital bed and she works out that, you know, Cole is always going to be praised for taking their kid to the doctor or standing outside the school gates. And she, even though she's the one who's keeping a roof over their heads and everything, she's always going to be criticized for not being everything, not doing, you know, not doing all the things. And so yeah, I mean, Cole is incredibly dangerous, but he doesn't think he is, which I think is sort of the important differentiation between him. Like, I think a lot of male characters in thrillers often know that they're dangerous, or they want something that's dangerous. Cole doesn't want something dangerous, and he doesn't think he is. So I think, yeah, I think that's what I meant more. But yeah, he is. I mean,
Yeah.
he would be, I'd almost rather be in a relationship with someone who was actively horrible to me than Cole, because
Yes.
at least that's
Yeah.
easier to navigate, you know. And
Yeah, you know where you are with it. I mean,
yeah,
with I love the way that you work. I mean, you do, it's not complicated to read, but it must have been incredibly complicated to write the structure when you bring Mel in. And so Cole is going forward over a few week period, and then you bring in Mel and go back 10 years and take us forward year by year. And that period at the beginning where she first meets him, and she's so, and here's that word again, grateful,
yeah,
you know. And I do think that great gratitude and anger probably do sum this book up. It's like she's so grateful to meet a decent guy.
yeah.
that it doesn't
completely.
really, nothing else matters really, because he's just a decent guy.
Yeah,
And that's
and he's
enough.
so much nicer than the people she's been out with before. You know, she says all that at the beginning. You know, he's where he says he's going to be. He, you know, he's thoughtful. He'll watch a cooking show on TV with her. You know, he doesn't send her late night texts, cancelling, all those sorts of things. That's what, you know, it's the same thing. It's that low bar. It's like not, and being so sort of bamboozled by that you let so much slip. And also, I think with Mel, I really wanted to write her in the way that she's been so tricked by society in so many different ways. Mel's got this sort of belief that she almost should be somewhere. You know, she's 36 when we first meet her, and she, you know, she sort of thinks she should have a husband and a baby and a flat
Yeah, the
and a
timeline.
career, and
Yeah.
you know, she's sort of, and actually I think the truth about Mel is that if she really had investigated herself before she gets to sort of 4 years in with Cole, she'd have realized those are not that important things to her, but it is that trap that society does to women. It's like, this is your box. You have to, if you want to sit in the career box, you also have to sit in this domestic box. You can't, you know, men have never bought into the have it all myth. You know, this is what I love. You know, it's like, that was that early feminism, like that have it all thing. And you were like, men have never had it all. They've just gone out to work, and then they've often come home after the kids are in bed and they've not done anything. And, you know, I mean, I'm talking about, you know, like 50s, 60s men, you know, and I'm like, women, we were suddenly, you know, when I was a young woman in the like 80s and 90s, I was told to have it all, like, you know, be a career woman, have kids, you know, have a sparkling home, you know, all those things. And it's like, it's so crazy. It's like nobody could be like that. So I think that's what Mel has bought into all that. But I think actually what Mel gets fulfilled by is her job, you know, that's what she loves. And if she was a man, that would be fine. She would just, she's, you know, she's incredibly successful. She does what she does so well. And that would be enough if she was a man. But it's not, because, you know.
Yeah, because that's, you know, in Cole's eyes, in society's eyes, selfish, you know, and
Exactly.
God forbid that a woman is selfish. But really, it's all about, isn't it, about Cole? She has to put Cole first. And that's kind of
But
what it boils down to.
Cole's
Her,
wants always trump her wants. And I think that is really true of women. We are sort of brought up to please. And one of the ways we please is by giving people what they want. And I think that it's something we all have to relearn as women, is this thing of actually what I want is okay, you know, and I think we always feel, I think there's always a little part of us that feels wrong when we want something different. And it's, yeah, so it's, I mean, that's exactly what happens in Cole and Cole and Mel's relationship is, yeah, his wants come first. Although he would be shocked to hear anybody say that, but it's just completely true.
I mean, it's like Elaine has just said in the chat, it's like his wants come first to the extent of his rape role play.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, that served two purposes. That was because Cole obviously does dislike women deep in his heart, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and it comes out sexually for him, I think, because it's a place that he can be completely private and he can charm people into doing this thing, which again he has rationalized in his mind as not being a bad thing, just being something that he enjoys. But it's crazy that, you know, I mean, I did look into that a bit actually, and there are a lot of women who justify that in their men, for want of a better word. But I think it's because I think to really investigate that must be so damaging to your sense of self that you've allowed that to happen, that it must be so scary that you carry, or I mean, I'm sure there are some women who probably do enjoy it, I don't know, but it's like it's so crazy that, you know, it's the thing that women fear so much, and then to have to to play it out. I can't imagine what that would do to you mentally. But what I saw on the, you know, when I was looking into it was just women sort of saying, which I remember an argument being about porn when I was young, of just like, you're a prude if you think that this is wrong. Like, it's like everything's about, you know, free expression, and like if you're consenting, it's all fine. And I think that's true to a certain extent, but I also think that we have to ask ourselves why we're consenting to things and why those things have become part of our culture. I mean, I think pornography has a lot to answer for, basically.
Yeah. I mean, basically, almost everything we talk about, we could talk about for an hour, I think. I wondered when I was reading some of that rape role play, did you ever read a book in the 80s by an amazing writer called Jenny Diskey called Nothing Natural?
No, I didn't actually. No.
Oh, it's very
Okay. I know Jenny Diskey
it's
as a writer, but yeah, no.
yeah, she wrote, I think it was her first novel. Very, it covers that
Okay.
territory, and
All
there's
right.
some
I will.
very, that kind of, if you can, anyway, I'm not suggesting that it's not like a fun read, but
No,
it
I
does
will.
cover
I would
similar
love to.
ground.
That sounds brilliant.
um Kristen is saying that she loves Mel's frank assessment of motherhood, and how uncomfortable it made her.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that that is again something that we don't talk about much as women, in that, you know, being a mum is really hard and really boring at times, and really, you know, there are so many different things, and that and also just so, I mean, it's like, it's so crazy to me. I mean, I've got 3 children and I love being a mum. I've also found it exasperating and terrifying and all those things, but I would choose to do it again. But I think it's so crazy that we think as a society that every single person is going to want to reproduce. It's so mad.
Mm,
And men again sort of left that they, it seems to be okay when men decide that they don't want to have children, but for women it feels like this sort of unnatural thing. And that's something that Cole has, that's something that Mel really battles with. It's like, the further she goes in the IVF, the more she starts to question as to whether or not she wants this. But she doesn't really sort of almost let herself feel that. She suppresses it because she's like, she feels unnatural thinking that, and she thinks, you know,
mm.
this is just what everyone she knows is doing and what she's always imagined would happen to her. And I just think it's so sad that we don't have a space as women in our society to just be like, that's not what, that was never what I wanted, you know. And I think it's, again, I think it's starting very slowly to be more acceptable to say, but it's sort of, yeah, it's crazy to think that every single woman is going to want to have a child, which is, you know, but that seems to be the pervasive attitude.
There's so many, like Kristen's just said, there's so many themes in this book. Lots of people in the chat, you should have a look, talking about that childhood thing. And
Mm,
I never, I mean, like Nicole, I never particularly wanted children. There was quite a lot of pressure from my family. But I actually was not able to have children either.
yeah,
But I've always felt, and this, I always felt this says something about me, but I think it says something about society, that I always felt it was easier, better, whatever, to say when people ask, because they always do, because not so much now, I'm dead old, but they always used to, that it was easier to say that I couldn't, which was
I can
true,
imagine that. Yeah,
than to say I didn't want,
no,
you know,
I
and
can
it's, I think that's
completely
still the
imagine that.
case.
And I think, yeah, I think that probably is still the case and it's so sad because it's so, and it also, I think it blocks a lot of conversations about women, about female wants, you know, which I think again is, you know, mixed up in this book, is that if we, as it's meant to be the big and only want of our life, or, you know, the overriding want of our life, I should say, not the only, it blocks us from talking about the other things that we want, which then suppresses everything, you know, and it makes us feel guilty for everything that we say. I mean, when I had my first child, you know, he's 25 years ago, I I was just terrified all the time because I was just totally, and actually he was like, I had a child quite young, you know, and it was sort of, I sometimes look back and think in a way I was glad it was sort of unplanned and just happened, because I think if I'd had to sit down and make a choice at like 30 or something, like, do I want a child? I mean, I don't think anyone would ever, like, I think I'd have been so confused and I wouldn't have known what to do. Whereas because I just had him quite young, it was like, it was the thing I did. And and I had to work and everything had to fit in around him. And it was sort of, so I experienced being a mother in a different way, but it was completely terrifying. It was like, and I think we don't talk about any of those things. It's just, you know, meant to be this sort of like hearts and flowers thing that happens in a loving relationship with a partner who brings you flowers at the end of the day or something. And so, I mean, so few people have that.
Yeah, I mean, let's say we could talk about this for hours. Time is really, really super flying. Do fling your questions in the box if you've got any more. And I feel like we are not going to cover so much of what we could. I think even if we were here for 3 hours, we probably couldn't cover it all. But I do just want to touch on Lenny, because I love the way the reality of Lenny and Lenny in Cole's head. I mean, Cole's head is a dodgy place to be. Oh, somebody said we should talk about Cole's mum. I don't know if we're going to have time. But the reality, his fantasy Lenny and the reality Lenny. You have a lot of fun with that.
Totally. That was so much fun because I sort of, I mean, actually, I think when I first wrote the Cole section, I had Lenny being a bit too Lenny-ish, like who she really was in it. And then I wrote, and after I'd, you know, many drafts later, whatever, and after I'd really got to know Lenny, I was like, no, she's really clever, Lenny. She's not going to give him anything in that beginning bit. So, and I feel like she enjoyed it. Like, I love Lenny, and you know, I really enjoyed creating her, and I think she's fabulous. I mean, I have had a few people say they didn't like her, which hurts me, but no, I totally understand it. But I think she would have loved playing that game with him at the beginning, and yeah, it was really, really fun to write that. And yeah, my editor was a big advocate of that bit at the end of section 1 where you suddenly realize who Lenny is, and my editor's always like, I love that bit, that's the bit. So I was like, yeah,
it's like, I mean, Laurie makes a good point. I mean, like, I think that you can like Lenny, and she's a, you know, I think she's a badass and brilliant without entirely feeling comfortable with
what
how
she
she
does.
behaves.
I agree with that, and I wouldn't dare to be as brave as Lenny. I wouldn't dare to do that. But I sort of love her that she did do it, you know. And I also think that I don't think it's unbelievable what she's done. And I think that, yeah, I mean, I have met a few women like Lenny in my life who are just uncompromising. And they are always normally artists in one way or another, like, oh, like not, you know, like creatives, I suppose is the word. And they are always trying to change things. And I just love them. And I just sort of think that I don't know if I would want to be like that, but I sort of, I'm really drawn to people like that. So, but yeah, I agree. I think you can really like her and understand why she did what she did without fully feeling like you would do the same.
I mean, who did you enjoy writing most?
I mean, I probably did actually enjoy Cole. I don't know. Do you know, I enjoyed all of them because I really, because it's written in 3 first-person voices, I knew I had to be so distinctive with each character and know them so well and know what they would do for everything. So I became really immersed in all 3 of them. I mean, I don't like Cole, so I guess but he was enjoyable to write, but I don't like him. But I really liked Mel and Lenny, and I liked the sort of, I mean, I think Mel is the one who goes on the biggest sort of change over the course of the book. Lenny is always who she is, even though we don't know that at the beginning, but she doesn't change as such. She's but yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I probably enjoyed writing Cole the most because it was sort of fun to put him in these situations where you knew what was going to happen, but yeah, but he didn't.
No, Laurie's just made a really brilliant point about which I have to say I'd completely forgotten about what Lenny wrote about being cold Leonora. And
Yeah,
I love the way that you did that, and like that's the kind of outward manifestation of what Cole deciding who she should be.
absolutely.
Like, oh, and actually just talking about him is giving me like I'm coming out in hives. It's just like
I
it
know.
just
I think
really
it's
creeps me out.
he is creepy, and he is. But that sort of sums Cole's character up, that he really actually thinks he can rename her, like that. Just and tell her that he's met her for 5 minutes, and he thinks he knows her better than all the people who've gone before him who've called her Lenny. It's so arrogant, but it's also so something that you can imagine. And also, I think there's a real thing with women and names. We've had to give our names away so much, and it's like,
Mm,
so it's quite incredible to try to take a woman's first name. I mean, that's amazing.
yeah, I mean, oh God. Yeah, sorry, I'm just like getting into the chat, which I shouldn't be. I should be concentrating.
No, that's
Um,
I can see
uh,
people saying they've met too many Coles and dated them.
yeah, yeah. Well,
No,
I fear that I have.
I think we
And
all have. I think that's one of the things I've really loved about the response to this book, actually, is that so many women have told me stories, and sometimes they've been about men they've dated, or sometimes they've been about something bad that's happened to them, or sometimes they've been about revenge they've taken on an ex-boyfriend or something. And I just think that's how we get stronger as women. We tell the stories. It's like
mm,
it's like we were talking before. It's like the whole thing you're doing with menopause. It's like 2 years ago, we weren't talking, and now we're all talking. We all know what it is. A whole generation of women is going to go into menopause educated, which is, thanks to people like you. And it's like, it's so important, all those things. And it's like, the more we talk about things that have happened to us and that we don't want to happen anymore and that we want to move forward, the better, things will change, which is incredible, really. So I've loved that about this book, that people have been telling me personal stories, it's a real privilege, actually.
I feel like really reluctantly I'm going to have to wrap this up. I don't really want to. I think I could happily stay here all night. But I do want to point out that Nicole works in investment banking, and apparently they're all called Cole. And I
Oh,
don't know how
really?
you'll ever sit in a meeting again, Nicole. Um, I know
Oh,
you
God,
all
I
know what
can
it looks
imagine
like.
that.
I'm just gonna, you all know what it looks like, but for the people watching on YouTube and maybe haven't read it, here we go. One of the good guys. Does it look the same in the States?
Yes, it does. It just does. It's actually the American cover. We use the American cover in the UK as well. So, because I do think
Right.
I love that cover personally, which I can say because I had nothing to do with the design,
Yeah.
obviously.
So one of the good guys, Araminta Hall, that was fantastic, Araminta. Thank you. And before, what was that? The pregnancy test in the pocket. Oh God. And we haven't even talked about the embryos. And the fact that we live in a time where your editor didn't make you take that storyline out.
Oh no, I
Um,
know. I
you
never got
know,
I never got pushback from that at all. Well, as you can imagine, in America especially, they are very, very concerned with a
yeah, I
woman's
had
right to
that.
what is in their body or not. So I mean, again, it's another very important conversation that we need to be
Yeah.
having.
Oh God. We'd have to do this every Tuesday for the next month.
Yeah.
Before you all go, everybody, I'm going to give you a sneak peek of our February book. Um, and you know how it normally works is I will send a newsletter out tomorrow announcing it. And then you kind of put your name in the hat in order to get one of the 20 copies. But because you're here and I like to give you lot who come a bit of a advanced preview and a chance to get first dibs, here it is. You know the drill. Email me if you would like it. It's the List of Suspicious Things by Jenny Godfrey. Completely different. And I'm going to say 2 words, and I don't want you to think that this means there are more murders, because there aren't. Well, there are, but they're not. Not crime. It's not a thriller. 2 words: Yorkshire Ripper. Jenny was 8 or 9 during the Yorkshire Ripper in the 70s in West Yorkshire. And this is a novel, and it's about a little girl who's 12 called Miv, who it's 1979, and she decides to investigate, find out who the Yorkshire Ripper is, to stop her dad moving her down the south. Do you know what? It's fantastic. It's Margaret Thatcher Milk Snatcher and Drainpipe Jeans and Cherry Lip Gloss. Anybody who's the same age as me will know this. If you fancy it, email me, and you just get an advance shout on getting a copy, and we will be doing one of these with Jenny. Can't remember. I think the second week of March, but I'll put it in the email. So that's that. Thank you, Araminta, so much. You've been fantastic, and thank you everybody for coming. I think this might be my favorite one ever, and I didn't think I would say that after Nina Sibby.
That is a real compliment. Yeah. Thank you. I've really enjoyed chatting to you all.
Thank you. Thanks for coming, everyone. Good night.
Bye.